a type 2 civilization, a true type 2, would give every single person on Earth right now their own type 1 civilization as defined by Earth. Every person on Earth could have their own entire Earth worth of energy output. Every single person. And there would still be 2 billion Earths worth of energy output left over when it was said and done.
That is a lot of energy.
Hello and welcome to Entropy Rising, where we talk about science and futurism. I'm your host, Jacob, and as always, I'm joined with my wonderful co-host, Lucas. Lucas, how are you doing today?
Jake, I'm doing wonderful as always. Thank you for asking.
Yeah,
How are
of
you?
course. Oh, I'm doing great. I think I've said it before, but we're sitting down, we're recording. I'm going to be in a happy mood.
Yeah, it's always an amazing time.
Absolutely, especially jumping back into it. From our viewers' perspective, we haven't missed an episode, but you have again jetted off across the world, and we've had a bit of about a 1 month gap since our last episode.
Yeah, it has been about a month. It's been a very eventful month. I went to the Philippines. Jake moved into a new house, which is very exciting.
Yeah, so we're recording in a new area. Hopefully that sounds good. And we'll talk about your trip in the Philippines definitely during the post-episode discussion, which we post for free on Patreon. So if you're interested in hearing a little more about our personal lives, definitely check that out. Like I said, that is free on our Patreon. So there's no need to have a paid subscription. And I don't even think you need an account. I think you
can just jump right in. And we always love seeing you guys over there, posting your comments and getting to interact with you a little bit about our personal lives.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so today we are going to be having a discussion on the Kardashev scale, which I think is going to be a fascinating one.
Yeah, it's absolutely, because everybody knows of the Kardashev scale. Well, most people do anyways, but there's a lot of different ways to interpret it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how you perceive what it actually is, just because everything out there that has to do with energy and space is so hard to perceive, to begin with. So it really is a cool topic to delve a little bit deeper into and really spread out on the table.
Yeah, yeah. It's talked about a lot too. I think we've referenced it probably in every episode at some point or another, mentioning, oh, this is something a K2 civilization would do. So I'm looking forward to actually diving into it and expanding on that because, like you said, I think most people are familiar with it to some extent, but I don't know how much detail people have really dived into it with. And when I'm interacting with people on the internet, sometimes there is actually a little confusion as like what qualifies as a Kardashev 1, Kardashev 2 civilization. So not only are we going to expand into that, but we're also going to talk about the scales of these civilizations because I think also the scale of something like a K2 civilization is something people tend to miss. These can be quite large empires, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just thinking about it, we aren't even technically considered a type 1,
No,
our civilization.
again, and this is what I mean with the online thing. Some people's opinion on that differ. I know a lot of people say we're type 0.7, but I've seen other people argue we should be considered type 1, and we're definitely going to dive into that when we talk about each type in detail.
Absolutely.
I did just want to give a little bit of background on the Kardashev scale.
Oh, yeah, I think that's important.
The Kardashev scale was derived by someone named Nikolai Kardashev. He was actually a Soviet astrophysicist, and he made the Kardashev scale not really as like I sat down and made the scale. He referenced it or gave the idea of the Kardashev scale when he was writing some research papers about detecting extraterrestrial civilizations. And he essentially proposed this scale saying, a civilization that could use the entire power output of a planet or of a star or of a galaxy. And he used that as like an anchoring point to talk about how you would detect civilizations at different scales. And mostly he was talking about how much waste energy they would put out and how that's something we should could detect. And he was actually advising SETI, which is that organization that looks for extraterrestrial life, to look out for these telltale signals of civilizations. And his papers actually did change how they look for civilization. So it was obviously successful in that end. And of course now, this was proposed in the 1960s and here we are in the 2020s still talking about it. So I think it was a pretty successful characterization of civilizations, or at least it resonated with people very well.
Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to make a scale that can be used to detect life through the lens of a telescope. So I feel like that's why it was so well adopted by, government agencies like SETI, like pretty much anybody out there who's looking for intelligent life, especially back in the 60s.
Oh, yeah, because, one of the things we have to keep in mind, and we're going to dive into some of the criticisms as well, but when we're talking about the Kardashev scale, the original intent of this scale wasn't necessarily to gauge where a civilization is technologically, socially, or anything like that. This was purely derived as a way to look for a civilization through a telescope. And
Right.
in that sense, talking about power usage makes a lot of sense because I think that's the most obvious characteristic we can detect.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't really detect how much technology a civilization has.
No, you can, but it's like you're saying, based off of the amount of technology or the amount of energy that they're using, that directly correlates with technologies and output of, energy,
Yeah,
right? So,
we would think so. I don't think it's going to be more energy necessarily means better technology, but I do think there's going to be a strong correlation there,
of
right?
course. But yeah, with that being said, I think that it would be really important to touch on the three specific types of civilizations that he specifies in his scale.
Yeah.
The first one being the type 1 civilization, which is a civilization that can harvest all the energy from its home planet, right? And then you have a type 2, which is a civilization that can harvest all the energy from its home star. And then you have a type 3, which is a civilization that can harvest all the energy from its home galaxy.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a key point of the Kardashev scale. And I think this also can create a lot of confusion because when we're talking about type 1, type 2, type 3 civilizations, in the original Kardashev scale, he really did only reference their home planet, their home star, their home galaxy.
Mhm.
But it's worth pointing out there can be a considerable amount of variation in the energy that a planet gets or that a star outputs.
Yeah.
So if you're using the original Kardashev scale, as it was proposed by Nikolai Kardashev, then two type 1 civilizations could be vastly different in energy depending on whether their planet's orbiting something like a yellow dwarf star like our own or potentially a red dwarf star, in which case they're going to get, almost a tenth of the energy output. But they're still using all the energy that reaches their home planet. So by Kardashev's definition, despite having an order of magnitude of energy difference between them, they're both still considered a type 1 civilization.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand where you're coming from with saying that. But I also agree with Kardashev that if a civilization is able to harvest all of the energy from a planet, whether they're getting, whether it's a super Earth or if it's just a small rocky planet, they would have had to develop similar or almost the exact same technologies to do so. So therefore, they might not be harvesting the same amount of energy, but they might be on the same level technologically.
That is a fair point. I mean, if you are able to harness all of the energy in your solar system, for example, a type 2 civilization, regardless of the star type, that's still an impressive feat of technology.
Now, I wonder if you're a type 2, right? And you have 3 stars in your system. Do you have to harvest all 3 to be considered a type 2?
These are the edge cases. And this is why I appreciate the Sagan modified Kardashev scale. So Carl Sagan, I don't think he needs an introduction.
He does not.
No. But Carl Sagan actually came in and said, all right, this is a really good characterization, but it's a little too vague. So he redefined the Kardashev scale. So he said a type 1 civilization uses all of the energy of its home planet and then used Earth roughly as a baseline and defined that as 10 to the 16 watts of energy. So then he said, okay, now we'll define type 2 civilization as using 10 to the 26 watts.
Right.
So it's a 10, basically 10 more zeros behind it. And then type 3 uses 10 to the 36 watts. So it's this nice uniform definition that you can apply everywhere. Type 1, 10 to the 16, type 2, 10 to the 26, type 3, 10 to the 36. Now, roughly speaking, Earth gets a little more energy. So on the Sagan modified scale, using all the energy that reaches Earth, which is 10 to the 17 watts, we would actually be a type 1.1 civilization if we were able to do that. But our sun perfectly meets that definition for type 2, and our galaxy perfectly meets that definition for type 3.
Right. Which seems a little biased. But
It was designed by what we can see, yeah. But I mean, the galaxy. I mean, I don't know.
No. I understand. It's I mean, it definitely makes sense that we would use that as our baseline.
And it is nice because then you can compare civilizations with a little bit of a better ruler or baseline. It's not all of the energy on their planet. We can actually have numbers in a scale, and we can say, oh, you're type 2.1, and you're a type 2.4, even though they're both harvesting the energy from their one star, for example.
Yeah, at that point, it's no longer like a bias. It's simply a unit of measurement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just like how we pick our units of measurements that work for us, this is the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So coming from that point, it makes it mathematical and easier to break down. So it definitely makes it a little bit more approachable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do like the Sagan modified scale. I think he's done the best. And interestingly, because he's defined numbers on his scale, we can extrapolate further back and further forward. I'm sure people have heard of type 4, type 5 civilizations, which is getting kind of crazy. But we can also go backwards, and we can say type 0 civilization, which is 10 to the 6 watts, which is 1 megawatt of energy. And I particularly like how that lines up because a megawatt of energy corresponds to about 300-ish campfires worth of energy. But that seems about perfect because 300 campfires would correspond to right when humanity had tamed fire.
Yeah, right when a civilization's moving past what makes humans human.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
you've tamed fire and you've obviously distributed that knowledge far enough in your population. This isn't just one tribe that's discovered it. You've got 300 campfires going at one time. It's like, okay, you're probably going to retain this information. You're not one disaster away from losing it.
Yeah.
And so, congratulations. Your reward is you've entered the Kardashev era. You are a type 0.
Amazing.
Yeah, you are a civilization at that point. I feel like that's just a really good definition. That works for me.
Yeah. Well, with most things, when you make them mathematic, they just kind of feel right.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
like things just kind of mesh together. And that's why math is cool.
Yeah,
You
that is
know?
true. And it's nice to have this uniform baseline. So I do appreciate how type 0 happened to line up.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, but I do enjoy the original Kardashev scale, just talking about those different semantics
Okay.
when it comes to, these different civilizations and how they could build up. But I do agree with you that Sagan's version of the Kardashev scale is much more approachable.
Absolutely.
But I will be mentioning just, like differences that could be applicable between two different type ones and the normal scale.
Of course, yeah. I mean, that's a fair thing to discuss, especially in an episode all about the Kardashev scale.
Yeah.
Now, I actually do want to talk about each one of these types in a little bit more detail. And I guess we'll start with type 1. So I know you mentioned earlier that we are yet to be a type 1 civilization.
I believe so.
Yes.
That we are yet to be a type 1. And the reason why I say that is a true type 1 civilization is able to harness all the power of its home planet. Now, to me, that is storms. That is the movement of our tectonic plates. That's all of our oceans, all of our rivers, all of our forest fires, everything. We have found a way to change our environment, shape it to our will, control the way that our planet builds itself and the climate that our planet has. And until we've reached that point, I do not see us as being a true type 1 civilization.
And I think the Sagan modified scale will kind of agree with you on that because if you sum up all of the energy that humanity currently produces through all the various means, we do land on about a type 0.7. The one thing that does not get factored into that energy equation that I do think is worth considering is the energy that we use for fields, for agriculture. Now, the Sagan scale will factor in the energy that we need to transport stuff, to use for vehicles, all of that. But the actual energy hitting the plants does not get factored in.
But it should be.
I feel like it, I feel like it should be because if you are cultivating this land and you have the ability to manipulate environments on that scale, I feel like that energy should be counted.
And especially when you're talking about crops, because what are crops but organic batteries?
Exactly,
right?
organic solar panels. Yeah,
You are storing energy in something that we will convert into energy for us later. So it really is and should be considered on the Kardashev scale.
I think so too. And that does move us up to about 1.1 category, or getting closer to type 1 category.
Right.
Granted, because Earth is a 1.1 on this modified scale, we can reach type 1 civilization status without using every stray photon that reaches our planet.
Of course, yeah. I'm not saying that we have to be able to absorb everything, but I'm saying that we should be able to manipulate anything that could create energy.
So I will also say, even by your definition, you say type 1 civilization should be able to modify their environment on a planetary scale.
Yes.
And I do agree with that. I think that was the point that Kardashev was trying to argue as well. But I would also argue humanity is pretty much there as well. I mean, we are not purposefully doing it, but we are changing the climate on a global level just through our industry.
Yes.
Now, we're not doing that on purpose, I grant you that, but the fact that we are capable of doing that, I think, is an indication that we are reaching type 1 status. I would also make the argument, and this is where people might disagree with me, but I think humanity does have the capability to go further. I think we could purposefully, for example, build a solar shade in our Lagrange point and shade the planet to counteract climate change. Right now, I believe we have the technology to do that. We don't have the coordination. Right now, there's no one nation could do that. But if we had, some type of Project Hail Mary situation where one entity could control the entire global output of humanity, I do believe within a decade we could potentially build something like that.
I agree with you. I think that we have a lot of that technology, but honestly, I have to stick with the mindset of we are not a type 1 until proven otherwise. Just because theoretically we can does not mean that we have.
See, so that's where I disagree. I think having the capability to do it is what defines that for me, not so much the are you actually doing it because of social economic issues.
Yeah, I mean, that is fair, and I do agree to you to a certain extent, but it's like I don't want someone to just tell me that we can and then we don't.
Yeah,
You know
that's
what I
fair.
mean? And yes, we can control our weather and our environment, but we're not using that energy. We are doing that with an excess, a mistake, right? So yes, we are making the earth sick, but we are not manipulating the earth to our whim, and that to me is a true type 1.
Yeah, and I see the distinction there, but I just think that we can. For me, and for me, it's the ability to.
Yeah.
But I can definitely understand your
No,
point too.
yeah, and you make good points as well. It's just that's where my mind lies.
And these are points I'm going to carry with the other scales too, with type 2s and type 3s, because for me, in the same way that when we talk about a type 1 civilization,
Mhm.
we're not talking about individual countries. We talk about humanity as a whole.
Right.
And that's a framework that I'm going to carry for type 2 and type 3,
Okay.
especially type 3, where I think it's basically impossible to have a type 3 civilization that's a cohesive civilization. But I would say if you have a situation where your humanity has colonized the entire galaxy and built Dyson swarms around every star, regardless of if they interact at all, I still consider that type 3 on a broad spectrum.
Now that I think about it, when you talk about it as it goes up in the scales, it makes more and more sense,
Yeah.
right? Because there will be things that they could achieve, right, as a large group, but organizing that many living beings with different ideals and things, assuming that we don't become a hive mind, would be next to impossible.
Yeah, especially considering just the vastness of our galaxy, right? There's
Yeah.
no way to organize an empire on that without some type of FTL. And we really should make an episode about stellar empires. I don't think we have yet.
No, we haven't. Yeah, I would love to.
We'll put
Sounds
that
like
on
Stellaris to me.
Yeah, we'll definitely put that on the cards for some of these upcoming episodes. But I think that without FTL, empire on that scale is just not possible.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. There could be. I mean, even within a solar system, it's not. I believe it would be next to impossible.
Absolutely. So then moving on to the next scale of this, type 2 civilizations. I think people underestimate just how massive a type 2 civilization is.
No, how so?
Well, okay, here's a great example. Star Trek or Star Wars. You're a Star Wars man.
I love Star Wars.
Okay. Where would you put Star Wars on the Kardashev scale?
I don't know. I put him at like. That's a good question. I put him at like a 2.
Yeah, I think most people would, right? I
Yeah.
mean, they're a galaxy spanning empire. They are not even close to a type 2 civilization,
Okay.
which I know sounds weird because you're like, oh, how is that possible? They've colonized all these systems. Like, there's, I think, thousands of systems in Star Wars, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. No, it's vast.
Yeah, it is. But the jump from type 1 to type 2 is a 10 billion fold increase in energy production.
Oh, when you say it like that, it is a lot.
Yes. Just, and this is a mind-boggling number, and I don't think anything I can say could truly get across how big of a number this is. But in an attempt to try, a type 2 civilization, a true type 2, would give every single person on Earth right now their own type 1 civilization as defined by Earth. Every person on Earth could have their own entire Earth worth of energy output. Every single person. And there would still be 2 billion Earths worth of energy output left over when it was said and done.
That is a lot of energy.
It is. And if a civilization were to colonize every single rocky planet in the galaxy, they still would not collectively get all of the energy output of a single Dyson swarm around our star. So
Wow.
even something like Star Wars, where they've colonized thousands of solar systems, they still do not have the energy output of a single Dyson swarm. They do not have type 2 status in terms of raw energy.
That does make sense. Now, the only reason why, and I'm understanding why now they are not a type 2, but it's in the most recent trilogy, right? They essentially create a small star inside of the new Death Star. I forget what it's called. Those movies were bad. I forget what it's called, but if they're able to create a sun, it just made like me in my mind, and I feel like you said like a lot of other people maybe think like that could be a type 2, but it's not.
It just depends how much energy they're outputting. I mean, and this is a point with the Kardashev scale as well. Some people get hung up on like the definition of using all the energy from your star, using all the energy from your world. You don't necessarily have to use all of the energy from one source. So if you decide, for example, not to pave your entire planet with solar panels, but you expand into your solar system and build nuclear fusion reactors,
Mhm.
and as long as you're able to hit that number, like 10 to the 17th, you're type 1.
Right.
It's not like you're not type 1 because there's some unused patches on your home planet, right?
Right.
So, as far as I know, and I'm not deep in the lore of Star Wars, I don't think they generate that much power, but you are right. They could potentially hit Type 2 status without building any Dyson swarms, just through alternative means of energy production.
Yeah, but now that I think about it, like a lot of Star Wars is not super focused on energy production. It's like a lot of metallurgy
Yeah.
and, like ridiculous ship battles.
They're cool.
Yeah, and like a lot of barren planets.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, like they're probably like a 1.2.
It's probably 1.5, 1.6. And I mean, again, they could have they're also like a magical, like it's fantasy. So,
Right, but as a baseline, but it is definitely good food for thought and a good comparison.
yeah. And another thing, just to drive home the sheer magnitude of a Type 2 civilization. Now, talking about population numbers is a little tricky because it can vary like crazy. I mean, you could have a Type 2 civilization that's a Matryoshka brain and just AI entities. Or
Yeah.
there's no reason that population trends have to continue. But if they did, if everyone got about the same amount of energy production as a modern American needs, you're talking about quadrillions of people that could potentially be supported in a Type 2 civilization. And just for context on how mind-boggling this number is, a Type 2 civilization, if they had about the same percentage of astronomers as we do in our current world, which is significantly less than 1% of the population, it's a tiny subset of our population, they could easily, without breaking a sweat, have one astronomer have his own telescope and monitor every single star in our galaxy.
Wow. I know a quadrillion, that's a hard number to even like put the zeros to in my
Yeah.
head right now. That's a lot of damn people.
It is a lot of people. And this also drives home the point of like when we're talking about dark forest theories and other Fermi paradox solutions, this is why it's like it's impossible to hide from a Type 2 civilization. If they can do one astronomer per star in the galaxy, you're not hiding from that.
No, absolutely not.
And for comparison, Type 3 can do one astronomer per star in the observable universe. And they could do more than one, but I think if the math works out, they could have 3 or 4 per star in the observable universe.
I mean, the scale is crazy as always, but it just is so just unfathomable.
Oh,
Like I can't even. It just makes my brain feel like it's being stretched when I try to think of things of that scale.
Yeah, and it's not, I think, even close to possible to comprehend.
Yeah, no, it's impossible, but it is really awesome to think about.
Absolutely. And I mean, so I think I hope I've at least kind of driven home how large a Type 2 civilization is.
Yeah,
And that's not even getting close to a Type 3 civilization.
yeah. Now, type 3, that's harvesting all the power of your home galaxy.
Yeah, it
Does that include the supermassive black hole at the center?
I believe so. Yeah, it's a Dyson swarm around every single star and harvesting all of the energy from black holes.
Not even to consider like what we would need all that energy for, but just to think about the sheer amount of resources that would be needed to produce something like that and the time that would be needed to get to a population like that. I feel like that's why a lot of people, when they think about type 3, especially when you're looking through a microscope, like you would see that. You would notice that.
Oh yeah, yeah. That is something. I mean, a Type 3 civilization. You're not missing that.
No.
You're gonna look up in the night sky without a telescope and you're gonna say, "Oh, there it is! Look at that big dark spot in the sky."
And it's funny because I'm sure a lot of our listeners have, known about this too, but there is in our galaxy the great dark spot. And that's what a lot of people thought it was. It was like a colony starting to break out and harvest suns, but it's not.
So that's in our galaxy.
Yeah, and when you look up into the Milky Way, it's the great dark spot. So it's just like a big mass. It kind of looks like a fat letter L.
So what is it?
It's just a spot where no stars are.
Just random. I mean,
Just by random chance.
Yeah.
But for a long time, people like I imagine since Kardashev came out with this scale, people were thinking that might be them.
That would be terrifying to see.
I know that's why.
'Cause, I mean, what you would see as this, if they did expand out and build the Dyson swarm, finish the Dyson swarm before going to the next star. Just imagine seeing this growing void in your galaxy, and it's like, oh boy.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, I guess we'll freeze to death.
Yeah, that would definitely be a terrifying one. So, Yeah, the type 3 civilization is just it is unfathomable to comprehend. And there are further scales. Kardashev and Sagan didn't go further, but some people have extrapolated type 4, which is usually a local cluster, and then type 5 is roughly the observable universe.
Yeah, type 5 is like an ethereal. It's like honestly, type 2s would be gods to us, but you're
Oh
like
yeah.
an actual god at that point. You can just create life, and we don't have to get into it. It's too ridiculous, but
I tell you, yeah, if they're the hypothetical type 5 civilization, to get to that scale, to
yeah.
colonize the observable universe, you have to have FTL. And at that point, you have mastery over the fabric of reality at that point.
Now, let's just a little thought experiment,
Okay.
because I always think of, we're living in a simulation. type
Okay.
thing. If we are reaching a type 1 and we are in a simulation, the people who made the simulation, would they be considered a type 5?
I mean, if you are a type 5 civilization in this hypothetical, you are basically the programmer.
Right.
You have gotten access to the source code of the simulation you are living in, is a
Mhm.
good way to think about it.
Yes.
You can do anything and everything.
Exactly. So it makes you think.
Yeah, you have cheat mode enabled.
Yeah. You've got the debug menu.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, going back to a type 3, it is, like you said, just completely unfathomable. But what do you think would be a reason why a civilization would even want to get to that point?
Well, so again, when we talk about type 3 civilizations, I think it's important to keep in mind this is not a cohesive civilization.
Right.
This is, broadly speaking, if you want to be generous, it would be humanity has gotten to the point where they've colonized the entire galaxy.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's oh, we need all the energy of our galaxy. I just think it's a bunch of local groups spanning out and getting energy when they need it.
Right.
I mean, you reach a new star system, colonize the planet, you start harvesting the star, and there's other groups doing the same thing at other stars. And eventually you get to a point where every star has been harvested and is being used for energy. It's not necessarily that we're all harvesting all of this energy to send it to something or anything like that. The same way that here on Earth, we're not all harvesting the energy that reaches our planet to do some coordinated effort with.
Yeah. Now, it just makes me think, because the jump from a type 1 to a type 2, energy wise and in the standard Kardashev scale wise, are both massive.
Yeah, 10 billion fold increase.
Right. You're switching from harvesting the energy of a planet to the energy of a star, which is a huge leap. But then when I think of a type 2 to a type 3, energy wise, it's still a massive leap, but it's not that big of a leap technologically, because you already have the technology to harness the power of your star. Now it's just, how fast can you get to all the other stars?
So, and this is one of the critiques of the Kardashev scale. The Kardashev scale is not a measure of technology. You can be a type 2, type 3 civilization with theoretically very basic technology.
Mhm.
I mean, realistically, there's nothing stopping humanity now from being a type 2. It's just the sheer engineering challenge of it. But all you need to be a type 2 is, essentially orbital solar collectors. And these can be as simple as mirrors, essentially.
Right.
So you're all right. Yeah, the technological leaps are not necessarily built into the scale. And that is one of the issues with the Kardashev scale. And I mentioned it earlier. We assume a correlation between technology and energy,
Right.
but there doesn't have to be. And I mean, it could be the case that before you reach type 2 civilization, you've discovered all of science. We can't just.
Discovered all of science.
Yeah, I know it sounds absurd.
I know that you're right, because there should be.
Yeah, you're not just going to have infinite technological progress. There is a potential end of the road somewhere, and it could be the case that you hit that on your way to type 2, and the difference between a type 2 and type 3 is just scale.
Yeah.
And that is a very possible thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really what just had, my mind rattling for a second there, because I was like, it really is just.
And we have no idea how deep this goes. I said there's an end of the road to science somewhere, but we have no idea where that is. I mean, I joked about a type 4 hacking the source code of the galaxy, but maybe that is possible. Maybe there are further realities that we can tap into, or maybe there's not. Maybe we're approaching it in the next couple hundred years.
Yeah.
And we have no way of knowing that. I'm not claiming that we're going to hit the end of the road soon or that we can't tap into some other crazy stuff. It's just, we have to acknowledge the possibility.
Absolutely. Yeah, that everything has to have an end.
So this is what I like about some of the alternatives to the Kardashev scale. We have something called like the Barrow scale, which he proposed that we don't try to define a civilization by its energy use, but instead by their ability to manipulate reality. So for example, a type 1 in his instance would be the ability to manipulate things that are around the same size as you. Think about early humans carving tools. You can manipulate stuff that you can hold in your hand. For him, a type 2 is the ability to manipulate down to like a genetic level. You can do genetic engineering. You can make viruses. You can make bacterium. Humanity is definitely here. Me and you've worked in a protein lab once, and we've worked with CRISPR and stuff like that. So that would be around a type 2 on this level.
Okay.
Type 3 is getting to like the atomic level. Now you're able to build custom built molecules, and arguably we're not there. We're tiptoeing with it. We have made, we can collide elements, we can separate atoms into their components, but I don't think we have mastery over it. So I think we're transitioning to there now. And then as you go down the scale, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller to the I think it's like the omega level is what he calls it, the final level, which is essentially you have mastery over the universe. You can manipulate matter to your will, and this is kind of corresponds to what we were saying with like type 4s and type 5 civilizations, where
Right.
you can do whatever you want. You can manipulate subatomic particles to your will.
I mean, yeah, that is definitely a good scale because if you can simply create what you want, then what's stopping you from progressing on the same level as the Kardashev scale.
Yeah, and I think it's just really important to keep in mind what the Kardashev scale was designed for. It was designed to help us find civilizations, not characterize them once they've been found.
Yeah.
This scale is great, and it corresponds, I think, really well to technological progress. I think as technology increases, you're going to have better mastery over smaller and smaller components of physical reality, but that doesn't help you find a civilization. Good luck finding a civilization that just got the ability to manipulate genes.
Yeah, no, that definitely does make sense. I mean, they do have their place. It's just the Kardashev scale has been so widely adopted to characterize civilization.
Yeah.
You see it or I see it a lot in like sci-fi or YouTube channels that talk about this stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's a good way to capture the scale of a civilization, even if it doesn't do a great job of capturing the complexity of that civilization. Because I have mentioned, you can be type 2 pretty simply with some basic mirrors and solar panels.
Yeah, but the Barrow scale is definitely very interesting as well.
Yeah, I think it's a fun one. And then there's some other ones proposed. I've seen some that argued you should characterize civilizations based on how much computational ability they have.
That's a good one.
Yep, I think that's a great one. Someone commented on one of our threads posts and said you should characterize a civilization based on how small their semiconductors are.
Oh, that's a great one,
Yeah,
actually.
I thought that was great too. I don't think that's a proposed scale. That was just a comment I got on our threads, and to whoever proposed that, I hope I responded to you. But I think that's a great scale.
Yeah,
It's a really interesting one.
that is a very interesting and well thought out scale idea.
So I mean, there's a bunch of different ways we can try to characterize civilizations. The Kardashev scale is not the only game in town, but I think the advantage of the Kardashev scale and why characterizing civilizations by energy resonates so well is because it's really the only thing we can see right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. And so it'd be fair to say that, if we were able to see or interact with more outside civilizations, the Kardashev scale would just be left behind.
I think so. Yeah. I think once you made contact and actually started interacting with them, you would probably move away from energy because it's not the whole story. And it could be the case that more advanced civilizations are able to scale down their energy use because of technological breakthrough, more efficient at using what they have.
Yeah, better semiconductors.
Yeah, better semiconductors, all kinds of things. And not just, they could be approaching near 100% efficiency with their technology.
Yeah.
And so don't need as much energy.
Yeah, it definitely makes me see it in a different light than I did going into it.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, that's about everything I have on the Kardashev scale. How about you, Lucas?
Yeah, no, I mean it was definitely an interesting segment to talk about. Changed my viewpoint on it a little bit. I find that happening a lot, in this podcast, which is why it's always fun to do it with you, Jake.
I enjoy doing it with you as well. I mean, I like the back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So next week, we've decided we're going to be talking about von Neumann probes, which I think goes well with the Kardashev scale. This is
Absolutely.
how we can picture people being type 2, type 3.
Mm-hmm.
So if that sounds interesting, if you want to learn about how self-replicating probes could potentially colonize our galaxy and hear me fanboy about the Bobaverse, because I will be drawing inspiration from that, then join us next week.
Yeah. We look forward to seeing you guys there, and thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you all for going, and please check out our Patreon, again, free, to hear our post-episode discussion.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.